Alrighty, so I have the new Megellda, of course, and I got a couple of team suggestions when I was live streaming. And so this is the team that we're going to be messing around with today. It is a full unknown team. We have Freyr, Freya, Shuna, which is kind of odd, and Red Megellda, of course. So I showed off the gear and everything there if you need to look at that. I'm going to be doing this as sort of like a live commentary over the footage that I've already sort of edited down a little bit. But shout out to Haste or Hast, I'm not exactly sure how to say the name, but they gave me the suggestion, of course, and they basically said that it's all unknown, so you can still use the card set, which is really good, and then Shuna is going to replace Elizabeth, which is nice because Elizabeth is a little outdated. And I think one of the biggest things people use her for is for healing and ult rush, whereas Shuna has a heal and it gives pierce rate, and on top of that, the new Megellda can heal a little bit as long as you cleanse debuffs off. Unfortunately, I didn't see the comment back to myself as well where she said, or she or he, I'm not entirely sure, they said that only down to that team is... only... Come on, man. The only down to the team is that the immunity debuff, or the immunity buff, is not there from Elat's ultimate, which is a big deal. I did definitely notice that there is no debuff immunity, which is quite a big issue, although, you know, you need debuffs to be able to heal with Megellda, which is a bit of a big one. You can see that during my gameplay, that the enemy, or the boss, sort of just went for targeting on Freyr pretty much the entire time, so I ended up having to swap over a couple of times and sort of get a good reset. I think in this video you're going to see me die at least twice, and it's basically because Freyr ends up getting targeted too much, so I had to swap over and put Tarmio Link onto Freyr so that way I could make sure that he would survive. The first phase wasn't too bad as long as whenever he uses his single target attack, I didn't already have debuffs on. I assume, I'm not 100% sure on that, I never really checked the boss to make sure, but I assume that his single target attack does more damage depending on debuffs, or maybe that's part of one of his passives or something like that, because if he had put the poison and bleed on me, I was basically screwed if I got single targeted. Like, it just does way more damage. So at that point, I kind of had to just rely on hopefully not getting too bad of RNG and just getting single targeted first before the AoEs, or I was able to hopefully cleanse off the debuffs before the next turn started. So it worked out pretty well. The first phase wasn't too difficult, but the real big kicker was going into phase 2, of course. The good thing about this team is that Shuna's level 2 attack has a stun on it, so it cancels stances, which means that you can get rid of the phase 2 boss here. You can get rid of his damage reduction stacks, which is a big part of this phase. And also you have Freya, of course, which I have her Holy Relic, which is another way you can get rid of those stacks, because it gains her Flood card, which is our single target, gains stance removal, which is a really big part of her Holy Relic. And then on top of that, Freyr is also on the team, who at level 2, his other card, not his cleave card, but his other card, stance removals as well. So there was a really good amount of ways for me to get rid of these damage reduction stacks, which was great. Altogether, I would say that there's a decent bit of synergy here. I think Shuna's passive really comes in clutch with the fact that you basically reduce damage taken on unknown allies by 20%. I genuinely think that if you don't have any sort of damage reduction, this game mode is going to be ridiculously hard. You have to be able to tank, which is another big thing. You can see there that I ended up dying with Freyr. The big reason is because he extorts you, and then once you get extorted, you know, there's not a whole lot you can do. If he attacks you after that, he's already sucked away your stats and everything, and he's basically just going to, you know, big-time damage on you. So that is a big issue. I definitely recommend having Freyr or I definitely recommend having Tarmio Link on whoever's getting attacked the most, because this boss just deals a ton of damage. I do wish that the team had some sort of debuff immunity stack, or just buff in general that I could put on, because even though I would lose the Megellda heal a little bit, I would at least be able to not have to worry about getting, you know, DOT damage on me, so like continuous like bleed and poison and stuff, if I can't draw, you know, a cleanse card or whatever. Like you can see right here, I have a really good hand, but it's just Am I going to be able to survive with that hand, really? Probably not. So you can see Freyr goes down again. Very, very unfortunate. But I do end up playing this one out a little bit just because I was like, hey, I have really good cards in hand. I have a level 3 Pierce card, which is a really big part of the last phase. You want to make sure that you save higher level cards, and Pierce cards actually help even more with whittling down the little gauge that you have to deal with in the final phase. So that is going to be something that I was just kind of like, well, do I really want to throw this run away? Like, even if I don't have Freyr, if I can somehow pull out a win here, I'll at least get the floor 1 rewards for it. So you can see going into the final phase, we have that gauge on the far left. If you don't know how it works, level 3 cards bring it down by, I think, 30%, or maybe I think it's 25%, but because we're going to be using the Pierce card, it's going to bring it down even more. I think it's like a solid 50%. Like, I almost think it like doubles. We're going to see right here, actually. So we use the Golden Pierce card. Boom, bam. Does pretty decent damage, nothing too crazy. It does bring him down to 50%. So the big thing with this phase is you can't kill the boss unless that gauge is completely down to 0%. And if you get the boss below, I think it's 30% HP, then he basically gains like a bunch of buffs that are gray that you cannot remove, and 2 of the buffs are attack-related stat increases, which are very hefty and will pretty much kill your run. I think that's what ended up happening towards the end of this attempt. But altogether, I think that this team basically has everything you need except for debuff immunity, of course. Like, you have Shuna, who can decrease ultimate move gauge on her ultimate. You have Megellda, who can also take off ultimate move gauge when it comes to her regular cards. And you have the cleanse for a little bit of heal, plus you obviously want some sort of cleanse to be able to get rid of those extra debuffs and everything. It's just a matter of card draw and a little bit of RNG, of course. So I really think that this game mode would benefit from some sort of character that can rank up cards, of course. I don't know if Gowther would actually work out too well, but he could potentially be good. The problem is if you're running this setup, you would have to replace like Freyr or something, and if you're only relying on one damage dealer, which would be Freya in this case, I don't think it would just take forever. Like, it would be agonizing to sit through this entire thing. So I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure there will be a lot more, varieties of teams sort of getting experimented with this new Megellda being out, especially because, the fact that she's an unknown character. I don't see her fitting into the goddess sort of team for the meta, of course, because she just has no way of becoming a goddess character. So that is definitely the biggest downside to her for this game mode, is that you can't just slot her into the most meta team. But at the same time, I mean, it might make a lot of room for an additional team that can be run. So an unknown team, or maybe even just like a Ragnarok themed team, I guess, because if we can get a new unit that is unknown, you can potentially just slot them in instead of Shuna, and hopefully they'll be somewhat of a similar kit to maybe Elat, where you have some sort of debuff immunity would be nice. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe another Pierce card would be good to help try to get rid of the boss if possible. You can see I just barely didn't kill the boss right there, and then because I got the I got him down too far, he gains a lot of attack-related stats, and then bam, I basically almost get one-shotted on Freya, and then boom, she's dead. That basically kills my entire run because the other characters just don't have nearly as much damage as they need. So yeah, moving into the final attempt. This is the one where I actually was able to beat the boss. So we're moving into floor 3. I have to say, it's insanely stally. Like, it's very time-consuming. I was actually able to get to the final phase here with Freyr, mainly just because I had Tarmiel Link on. There was a couple of scenarios where I was left with, like, very little HP, but because I was able to get the Tarmiel Grace to proc, I was able to heal up enough to where I wasn't completely screwed. Another big thing that you need debuff immunity for is in Phase 2. I forgot to mention that the boss has an AoE skill disable card, which is insanely hard to deal with. You just basically have to eat that and then try your best, because there's not really any way to remove the buff there, or the debuff. If Shuna's card... Well, I guess you technically could, because Shuna's recovery card actually does remove debuffs, but it only removes debuffs through her passive or whatever. Like, you can still use recovery cards, and those don't get disabled. but I think the problem is that he puts on other debuffs as well, so if it's not like the most recent debuff, it's not going to get cleansed off, you know what I mean? So that is a bit of an issue. Honestly, you get a ton of ults just by having Megellda on the team. Like, you can really rush ults and use those to kind of get through the lower phases, but obviously because you don't want to get the boss below a certain amount of HP, you can't just spam ults and stuff like that. In the final phase, you kind of have to be very careful with those and make sure that you're not going to, you know, drop him below that certain amount of HP to get those crazy buffs on. So you can see I did end up having to stall quite a bit. I just have to make sure that I'm not using any crazy cards. And plus, the ultimates in my hand are kind of clogging my hand up, unfortunately, and so I'm not getting enough card draw to really merge. At least I wasn't getting lucky enough to pull the same cards that I already had in hand, which was the issue. Of course, if I was able to sort of get decent merges, get cards into my hand, I basically was just having to whittle them down with level 1 cards here, which is not really the way to go, because level 1 cards are only bringing his bar down by it. I think it's 2%. It could be 3%, but I'm pretty sure during the match it was 2. I can't, the way that I'm recording this right now, I can't really see the bar too well. Like, it's really small for me, but yeah, I did end up getting really lucky a little bit later into this run, where I was able to pull a level 3 of Freyr's stance removal card. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was a level 3. So that was a really good way for me to deplete his gauge. But it just, this boss comes down to a lot of luck at the moment, and until they add like a Nidhoggr specific unit that has ways of sort of blowing through that gauge a lot faster, or upgrading cards so that way you have gold cards going into this final phase that you can use to whittle down his gauge a lot quicker. It's just a lot of beating around the bush, a lot of waiting, a lot of, you know, moving cards, a lot of, you know, just sitting there kind of hoping that you don't die. So you got to make sure that you have some way of healing, because obviously he's going to be doing damage to you each turn. Luckily, I was able to pull a couple of cleanse cards and stuff like that throughout here, and get a couple of Shuna res or recovery cards, so that way I could also get pierce rate buff increase, which honestly the pierce rate buff increase was kind of nice. The problem is during phase 1, the boss actually has a stance and buff removal on the AoE, if I'm not mistaken. So that is kind of troublesome. You won't get much use out of it in turn 1 or phase 1, but you know, it's not too bad. But either way, you know, it ended up being a pretty good run. I really can't complain too much. I must have been messing around on my second monitor there. But either way, I think it was good. It was kind of nice just being able to mess around with the boss with a team that actually did pretty well. Obviously, this isn't the most meta team or anything like that by any means. Here's that big merge that I was talking about. But it ended up working out perfectly, because I can basically use that gold card to remove 25% of his gauge, and then I was able to just burst him down with ultimates to make sure that he ended up getting all the way down to 0 HP. Plus, I have Freyr's ult, which hits twice, so I can kind of use those other 2 ultimates just to bring down HP, and then the Freyr ult will hit once to help bring HP down, and then at the same time, it'll bring the bar, or his gauge over there on the left, down to 0%. And then the second hit will kill him, because he should be at 0 or like 1 HP or whatever. So you can see pretty decent hit here, 141k on damage. We use the ultimate. It puts on the Abyss effect, which the Abyss effect is nice. I wish I had more dupes on my Freya, but you know, just kind of luck of the draw there. This is a team that unfortunately you do kind of need the Holy Relic. I guess you could probably get away with not having it. But you're not going to have as many chances to stance removal, which could be a big issue. But I was able to beat floor 1, which honestly is kind of uncommon for me nowadays. So as I kind of progress through and get better at Nidhoggr, hopefully I can find a more consistent team, or maybe I can get better with this team. But that is pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks again to Haste for giving me the team idea, and I will see you next time.